Hello, everyone. So I and my whole family's life has been taken over by Pokemon Go.
Oh, please. Let's save this till tomorrow because I had a conversation with Jillian about this, and I'll tell you, there are so many people walking around the city of Buffalo like aimless fools.
Can I explain? We will talk about this tomorrow, but I know Kevin's a collector of things and stuff like that, but you never got into Pokemon, right?
No, I don't know really anything about it.
Yeah. Pokemon Go is great, is like just, and we'll talk about it more tomorrow, but it is insane, and it is interesting on some levels, and just on other levels, like you said, Mike, it's nuts. I mean, if you don't understand it, it's got to look like the stupidest thing in the world, right? And the idea of this is, Pokemon's always been, got to catch them all was their theme, right? You got to catch all the Pokemon. Now you actually go and walk around your neighborhood or anywhere else that you go, and with your phone, and it'll sort of say, oh, there's footprints, and you follow the footprints, and you actually get to the Pokemon, and then when the Pokemon show up on your screen, like in augmented reality, so you see the world around you and the Pokemon, and then you catch it, and you bring it in, and then you have to go to certain places, like restaurants, to have and there's advertisers, I guess, where you have battles it's like this is going to make a gazillion dollars.
It's sort of like a treasure hunt.
It's a huge scavenger hunt.
Yeah, but the thing is, I heard there's somebody who's hacking into this app and sending people to certain places where they're getting set up to be robbed.
Yeah. See, I worry about stuff like this.
Yeah, this has been a bad thing. I read that story as well, and there's been predators who have taken advantage of this situation.
Oh man, well yeah, that's something that's nuts. I mean, I would never let my kid roam the neighborhood. We're not, in the days when we were kids, when we could just go out. We don't. I'm always with my kid when he goes out, but the malls are crazy. But the fun part of this, okay, is that you actually do run into other people in the mall are doing it, and they're like, oh, I found this Pokemon over by the Disney store, and there's this whole conversation going on with strangers that you would never. That's kind of cool. To me, that's unique. And fun to actually, and it's getting the people who usually get the least amount of exercise, which is the gamers of the world. The people who sit around and do.
This is your take on it. Gamers are getting exercise. How about this?
Tons of exercise.
The rest of the world is getting annoyed by this.
Yes, it shouldn't annoy anybody, honestly.
I mean, last night, I wrote an article. I wanted to sort of unwind. I went to the Corner Cafe, the place that Russ and I went before we met Kevin for breakfast the day of the draft, and
nice place.
That place was one of the centers where the
it's probably yeah.
So it was driving everybody crazy because you had these kids walking around with their phones and jabber-jawing. It's like, how friggin' annoying.
Well, it has. Yeah, that kind of stuff has to stop. And I've seen places that the funniest thing, people posting signs. No, you cannot catch Pokemon without unless you're a paid customer.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
You can't go into the store unless you buy something.
No, so what's annoying about them? They're loud and abrasive, or
they're walking around with their phones.
It's the people walking around with their phones, like Mike said. It's the online onslaught, which, if you're on Twitter or whatever, it's an avalanche of this garbage.
Right. Well, on Twitter right now, it's all that people are talking about, right? And it's at least, but yeah, because it's it's the geek world thing. It's totally geeky. I mean, I wouldn't be a Pokemon person at all. I was way after my time, but
world, that's fine by me. But this is just something that.
Yeah. No, but man, for my son at his age, this is the perfect thing. Like this, you cannot get more. They made the perfect.
Trying to win something? Can you win or?
You just collect these things. So you collect. There's 150 different. There's 750 Pokemon creatures, right? But there's 100. They've just released the first generation, which is when the Pokemon first came out, was 150. So those 150, and the idea is you collect them, and then you go to when you have reached a certain level, you can go to actual places. There's two different kinds of places. There's places where you can go and collect more Pokemon, which are some stores, and then there's actual stores that are battle stadiums, they call them. And your restaurants where you can go and fight other Pokemon people with your Pokemon and win prizes. So there. So
What's more annoying? The sound of a big wheel on the concrete at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, or this? Mike?
I think this is more annoying.
Well, you don't have any children.
I don't think I'd be bothered by either one.
There you go.
You haven't been bothered by the sound of a big wheel, Kevin? Come on.
I got, I had 3 kids.
Yeah, no. I mean, to me, there's nothing greater than the sound of your kids skating on your backyard rink at 7 in the morning on a Saturday.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. Two things before we start the show.
Yes.
One today is 7-Eleven, so everybody should head get a Slurpee. The other thing is that not in hockey, but in basketball, Tim Duncan, I'd say one of the maybe top 10 players in NBA history, 5-time NBA champion, retired after 19 years, and I was trying to equate because this is a guy who's very understated, stayed in a small market his entire career, won 5 NBA championships, who the sort of equivalent of him in the NHL would be. And I was, I don't consider Detroit a small market, but Yzerman staying there as long as he did, I thought was a good comparison.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work for the staying in one place, but I would say in terms of the impact on the game, but being unassuming, I'd say Ron Francis.
I was thinking
That's what I was going to say.
too. That's really funny. I thought that too.
Yeah. But I agree with Mike. Like, staying, part of Duncan is staying in one spot, so that doesn't quite work. That.
Wow.
And that comes on the heels of Kevin Durant, who was in Oklahoma City and left for Golden State, which, he's catching a lot. He's catching more heat than LeBron did when he left Cleveland.
Well, there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a lot of people like me that feel like, hey, when you're a player that is the leader of a team and you get close to a championship,
right?
Don't bail on that team. You try and recruit more and become the reason you win the championship instead of trying to become a complementary piece to win a championship somewhere else when you're only 28 years old. It's not like he's 35. It's not like he's Dave Winfield where he just latched onto a team so he could win a World Series. This is, and this is bad. This is what the NBA has created is a mercenary kind of atmosphere where guys can conspire, get their own contracts, join the teams that they want to try and win a championship. It doesn't work out every year, but it's a lot easier in that sport than any other sport.
I agree. That's why they do it. It's because you really, it takes 5 guys to win an NBA championship, and obviously you need a 6th and a 7th guy, but the point is, it's not the same as in any other sport where, in baseball you can't just have 4 guys and expect to win a world championship. You got to build a real team. The same is true in football and then obviously in hockey. In the NBA, you pick the right 3 guys, you're in really good shape. So. Yep. That's why it is more of a mercenary-like game there.
Now the question is, would Stamkos have taken any kind of close to the type of heat that Durant is taking right now if he had signed with Detroit or Toronto?
It's different though. Stamkos is not at the same level Durant is in terms of impact on the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I thought of Mike Modano too. I don't know why Mike Modano came to mind. It's just like another guy who stayed basically. He wasn't there his whole career, but felt like it was.
I think that's decent too. I like that. I mean,
it's definitely an off-market place, where.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have that. So, all right, let's get started here. That was already good hockey talk, though. So, maybe we just include that.
Yeah.
Include that, but I'll just hit a bell. Bell. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, July 11th, 2016.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen from USA Today Sports.
And I'm Eklund, and losing it. Now you're watching HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday and is brought to you by people like you at Patreon.com/hockey, where you can subscribe to the HockeyBuzzCast, and where this week we'll be doing our first ever special podcast for you folks. So keep checking Patreon, and you'll get a special email when we do it anyway if you're subscribed. So you'll get an email and know when we're doing it. So it'll be later in the week. We'll have something for you, and it'll be called the HockeyBuzzCast Off the Record Show, where I get to tell all the stories I'm not allowed to tell. Not really, but something like that. It'll be kind of fun. I promise you it'll be different. And also, if you want to be on that show, you have to let us know. If you have a Google Plus account, you can come on. We're going to have a couple people every week on that show, so it'll be kind of fun, and you can be a part of it.
And we don't even have a screener, so
Right. It could be, you could get by just putting $5 in, you could totally punk our show if you want to. So there you have it. But I can. But
Correct.
I do have a mute button. I do have a kill button, so I can kill anybody instantly. So if you do try to do that, it'll be
I
quick.
can kill anyone instantly.
I
Excellent.
can. That's the best.
And just for those,
There's our show title.
it literally will kill you. It literally will kill you.
Be nice, or I can kill you instantly.
There you go.
All right, let's get into things for a second. And we had an interesting discussion before the show, which I wanted to get into, is the debate now. The Florida Panthers are rumored to be in the Chris Russell sweepstakes. Well, they've been rumored before. This is not new news, but it's kind of picked up a little bit of steam. And I don't know if this is because, everyone's like, well, the Panthers are signing everybody, so they might as well be signing him, or if this is legit or what have you. But I wanted to talk to you about this, Kev, because I wanted to debate you on this, I think, a little bit, hearing your opinion earlier on. I'm not sure. So what's your opinion on all of this?
Well, I like what the Panthers are doing, but I think people should temper their enthusiasm a little bit, simply for the fact that, the Panthers were a success based, in my opinion anyway, on their ability to prevent goals from being scored against them. They had a really good defensive system, and Gerard Gallant played a big role in that. Now, saying all that, I like Keith Yandel, who is a terrific power play performer, and I think Demers is a very dependable defenseman. But, everybody's talking about how they've upgraded. Well, they've given up Brian Campbell, Kulikov, and Goodbranson.
Right.
So they really needed to, I get that Matheson is going to step in and play more minutes. But I'm just saying, that's a little bit of an unknown, just because he's a younger player. So before we get too excited, I think, unless they add one more defenseman who is a veteran, which is an easier read for us, I think we have to be a little bit cautious in getting overly excited what they've done. Right now, to me, it seems like they've changed the personnel, but we just don't know quite how it's going to work out. But I like the people they're adding.
It smacks of change for change's sake. I think Kulikov's a pretty solid defenseman. Goodbranson is good in his own end. Campbell is a little long in the tooth, but he was still effective. Otherwise, I don't think Chicago would have signed him to a one-year deal. And Demers is a good right-hand shot defenseman, and Yandel is good offensively. But I really don't see where the progress was made, where that their defense is improved. And I think they're spending. I know Campbell's contract was over $7 million. They weren't going to renew it for that much, so there would have been a decrease there. But it seems like they're spending more money on a defense that's basically staying at the same level.
Here's the thing: what I worry about in this league is it seems like you need to keep a defensive core together to be successful. It's hard to have a bunch of free agent defensemen all click at once. It's not like you've added, Niedermeyer or Pronger, where this guy's a Hall of Fame defenseman, and basically that pairing you don't have to worry about. There's nothing to worry about. But when you change three parts like that, that's a lot to change in this NHL. The reason, the Rangers were successful for a couple of years is because they had kept that core together, and they added, one guy, and they tinkered a little bit. This is a lot of tinkering, and you do have to wonder if, A, they're not spending too much money in 1 year, and B, is it too much tinkering on defense?
Yeah, well, what I would say is that we kind of circled around, but haven't really said is that Yandel does affect change. And no one knows that better than Russ, who watched him with the Rangers. He started out slowly with the Rangers, but by the end, his importance and his significance was well established, and he will be a game changer. And I think the hope is that his offensive knack will make the forward group a lot better, because none of those three guys. Campbell's pretty good offensively, but he's not Keith Yandel.
No,
but he was very, very, very effective. It's funny. Here he is. They did try to re-sign him. Actually, offered more money than the Blackhawks did, but he really wanted to go to Chicago. And the Blackhawks are really excited because they think, Coach Joe Quenneville, as I've said on the previous podcast, just has mistrust over defensemen. He has trouble trusting his defensemen. And he just can't come to love the guys that have come in to try to replace Johnny Oduya. And I think Van Riemsdyk, by the end of last season, he was settled on him. And now all of a sudden, he knows Brian Campbell. This is going to fit. I think he's going to be very happy with his 5 defensemen. Well, but we're taking this guy that we're still very positive on, and he's gone from that unit. So. I just think it's just a difficult read, and we won't know. And as Russ's point's a valid one. Sometimes you got to play together before you kind of come together. So it's going to be interesting to see.
And the other thing is that you don't want to be going through sort of a defensive transition with what's going on with their goaltending right now. I mean, the word out of Florida is right now that Luongo will be ready for the start of the season. There was a little bit of concern that he had off-season hip surgery, that he would probably miss the first month. Now they're saying he probably will be available early in the season. And they added Reimer on a long-term extension or on a long-term contract as a free agent, longer than I thought he was going to get, and they traded for Red O'Bara. So, I mean, if Luongo is slow in responding, or Reimer has not been great with teams that have had bad defenses or disorganized defenses in front of them, that they get off to a bad start. I mean, I think it's really important for that team, with all the changes that have gone on, for them to start positively. If they fall behind, you don't know what's going to happen with the season.
I agree, and I mean, and the bigger thing, the bigger elephant in the room is who's running this whole thing. That's like, to me, that's like the biggest elephant in the room of the Dallas with the Florida Panthers. Like, who is running this? Is this, because this does not feel like the Dale Talon stuff that we've heard in the past. This doesn't feel like the Dale Talon moves. It's, some of them feel similar, but this feels a lot more like accelerated in some ways.
Well,
and it's a lot more like we have to get something done faster than
Well, I
Dale
want
Talon
to get
usually.
Kevin's input on this, because I saw a report a few days ago that said the owner of the Panthers, Vinny Viola, had basically said to his management group, I want to win a Stanley Cup within 3 years. And everything that they've been doing, the extensions to Trocheck, the extension to Ekblad, locking up all these guys long term, spending a lot of money. I mean, it seems to be in that direction, but they've been letting this evolve naturally and not putting too much pressure on guys like Ekblad. And now there just seems to be the full court press we need to win right now. And I don't know if that is going to work.
I think if you would bring the fire marshal in to Sunrise today, he would say that Tom Rowe is the accelerant to this place. I think was named the general manager, and Dale Talon is still part of it, but when you bring a guy in like that, no matter what kind of spin you put on it, clearly they wanted Tom Rowe to have more power, and clearly he's been, Dale Talon's pretty aggressive too, and I think did a wonderful job, in my opinion, of building that team. On the other hand, I agree with that this does feel like this is Tom Rowe, putting his stamp on the team and, pushing the agenda forward at a quicker pace. So, but notice he hasn't fooled around with the core forward group that they have, other than trading Grimaldi, which and he's not a player who has developed the way the Panthers had hoped he would.
Well, I mean, that's where it's going to get interesting, Kevin, because Huberdeau has got one more year on the bridge deal, then he's an RFA, and everybody else has been extended, and they haven't done that for him. I mean, Jágr, they're going to go year by year with him. But it's interesting, the moves that happen, and a guy like Bukestad, who was locked up by Talon, who knows whether he's gonna do whether he's gonna be part of this solution, or whether or whether he gets moved out.
Right, that's what we don't know, and there's a lot of little. I'm not, it's hard to judge this until we see what happens in the regular season. It's hard to judge whether or not this, is going to be successful the way this is played out. But
the one gamble that Kevin sort of mentioned that I've heard before is that Talon thinks that Matheson could be like a Duncan Keith type, and I don't see it. I've never seen, that kind of ability in him. So this year he is going to have to step up in this new environment. So that's going to put a lot of pressure on him.
Well, they obviously have a lot of confidence in him. They played him in the playoffs.
Okay.
I mean, I believe he played for Team USA at the World Championship. So, his in their minds and in USA Hockey's minds, his stock is rising. So I think they're going to go with him.
So a little bit of big news today in the AHL front, and that would be that the Montreal Canadiens have moved their farm team from St. John's to Laval. Or Laval.
Yeah, and this weekend, Binghamton moved to Belleville, Ontario. So, Binghamton's been an AHL city for 35 years. I remember the Binghamton Whalers were there.
Yeah, I've been in that building. I liked the building. It was a nice building. They probably, look, a lot of those places never get the fans that they want to, but they had a decent following there. The interesting thing is Belleville literally had a team stolen from them, like literally just taken away by like the bad city management, and people used to show up for that. I've been in Belleville, and I know that was a big part. So I think they'll get better attendance, but it's kind of lousy. You take one out of one and you put it to the other, and this one lost one, so now it gets one back. All that gets crazy.
Those AHL teams, though, I mean, there is no dust on their shoulders. I mean, the AHL teams just move, and they move a lot. Like in the last year, obviously, we saw a ton of them move, right? But before that, my gosh, and now two more, and it's no big deal. If a team moves the NHL, it's just enormous.
The big consideration with St. John's, Zach, because Toronto had their AHL affiliate in St. John's for years, and then they moved them back to Toronto because it was much more convenient for them to have their AHL team literally right across the street. But with St. John's, it was travel. It was the fact that like when the Marlies or any other AHL team would go to St. John's, they would play 2 or sometimes even 3 games in a row because they didn't want to. The flight to St. John's was so expensive. So they would.
Where exactly is St. John's?
Newfoundland.
Newfoundland. It's way out there. It's like beyond out there.
Right.
Way down yonder in the Paw Patch.
And Laval's in Nova Scotia, right?
No, Laval's in Quebec.
It's in Quebec. Okay, I thought it was still out there. Okay,
I'm not sure.
This really is a major factor. The distance from the parent club to the minor league team. I was in Arizona on assignment, and there was a whole lot of talk about the farm team going to Tucson, where they'll be able to. It's just a drive. It's an hour and a half drive from between the two cities. So, and it really makes it convenience. And I think you'll see much more of a back and forth between the two because of that. So it really does have an impact, and now we're seeing it in California as well. The only problem is when you're a player who's doing the back and forth, it's a little bit of an issue because you could get called up Tuesday afternoon and be sent down Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. So
Buffalo was in Rochester for years, and then they moved their AHL affiliate to Portland, Maine, and it affected their ability to call up players quickly. And when usually, Rochester, they're down the I-90 an hour. If somebody gets hurt at practice or the game day skate, they can call somebody up, and that's the advantage that Toronto has. Like I said, very close. Whereas Portland or St. John's, if they miss that flight to Montreal, they're screwed until the next day. So that definitely has to be a consideration.
Yep.
I really wanted to touch base too on Kevin, your article, which was just posted a few hours ago, which is all on USA Today, which is 8 NHL teams that could be active in the trade market this offseason, and really good story.
Yeah, well, we basically, if you look back at the stories that I've written since the draft, going into the draft. We all wrote essentially that we were expecting a lot of trades because we were told by general managers and team officials, look, a lot of us have cap issues, and we need to figure out how to change our teams, but we need room and maneuverability to be able to do that. And what happened was those trades didn't happen, and then David Poyle, I think, sort of said it succinctly when, he said, I kept reading we were going to all do a lot of trades, but how could we do trades if we all have cap problems?
Right.
And what he predicted was, okay, when all the free agents are gone, then the decks will be cleared and everyone's going to look around and say, okay, I still need to improve my defense or my forwards, so then we'll see trades. But, we had the top players go in the first 31 minutes, and yet we still haven't seen trades. And I've been talking to GMs about it for a week, and they're all saying the same thing. Trust me, there's going to be some trades. Yeah. And so with that in mind, I decided to write a story and sort of talk about the teams who are still likely to make trades. And, there are other teams other than those 8, but those are the teams that I think really need to do something. And, obviously the Anaheim Ducks, I really haven't addressed their offensive issues, and the likely way for them to do that would be to trade Cam Fowler.
Right.
The New York Rangers really wanted to, and Russ can speak to this, wanted to significantly change their look, and they really have not been able to do that, primarily because it's been impossible, I think, to trade Rick Nash. So, they've made small changes with Grabner and Gerbe, but I still think they're going to try to shake it up just a little bit. But if they can't trade Nash, then maybe they won't be able to do that. And then Ken Holland has said publicly that he'll address whether or not he needs to make a trade on defense in September. So that's coming as well. And then I really think the Blues are going to do something like they've been. When you say this, it comes across as if I think Armstrong has done a poor job. I don't think he's done a poor job. I think he's actually done a nice job assembling a team. But when you see the net result of what's happened at free agent,
Yeah.
they have lost Troy Bauer and David Backes, who were really crucial, essential in their playoff run. And I think this Blues team is a very good team.
Mm-hmm.
And they're gone. And they've only added David Perron. And meanwhile, they've also given up Elliott. So I think they have to do something. And we all know, because we've been talking about it for 2 years, that the most likely guy to be traded would be Kevin Shattenkirk. Now, saying all that, Doug Armstrong has said we may not move him. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Well, that sort of touches on a little bit of what I wrote yesterday, and then I want to get into some of these teams individually. But what I wrote yesterday was, the whole issue here going on in Philadelphia with Braden Shen, and Braden Shen's yet to sign, and they're pretty far apart from all indications. Not that I think it's impossible. I think that we'll get him signed. I do feel like they will, but I think that there are starting to be rumors that pop up involving him, which is typical when a guy's not being able to be signed. And the latest one involves St. Louis, and Shattenkirk forced Shen and some other players put into this deal as well, which would include Mark Streit from Philly, which would give them sort of a replacement for Shattenkirk short term, as far as a power play guy, for 1 year, and they don't need to worry about signing him after that. And Piyarvi coming the other way too, from St. Louis, involved in that trade. So it would be Shen and Streit for Shattenkirk and Piyarvi. That was the rumor that I heard. Now, there is some logic to it. I did get a lot of people who told me right away that St. Louis would never make that trade. And that was very, and I wonder sometimes too, when these things pop up, is this a team's way of pressuring, Braden Shen into getting him to sign, thinking that, we can move you as well. I don't think that's the case here, but you always have to be wary of it.
Well, it would be surprising if Philadelphia would trade, I think a pretty good piece up front in Braden Shen, who's is in a 15 to 20 goal scorer at least.
Yeah, at least.
And trade for a defenseman with all the depth in that organization that's going to be coming in the next year or two, with Provorov, with Moran, with Sanheim, with all these young defensemen. You would think that if they trade Shen, they would want to trade him for another forward rather than for a defenseman.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I sat in front of Ron Hextall, and he was asked the question, and he didn't even blink. He's like, look, this is a good thing because this puts like a date on when we have to have Shen signed by or he goes to arbitration. So I expect this deal to be signed like 3 hours before they have the arbitration. Honestly.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I think that's how they're playing it. I don't think there's anything else with it. Now, would the Flyers like to lose Streit's contract? Yeah, probably. But at this point, they still probably need him if they want to compete, because as good as Gostisbehere looked, you don't know what's going to happen if you give a second-year player full reign on the power play. And that's the issue I think that they're probably having and have to wait and see before, while the season starts. Then if the season starts and it's clear that he can be replaced, then I think he can get moved at the deadline. But I don't think this trade's going to happen. I just think this is the way it's going to shake out. I think the Flyers know what they have forward-wise, and they know that nothing's coming soon. Konechny's the closest, and again, that's iffy if he makes the team at all. And so you really don't have anything else coming for at least another year. And I think they know that, and I don't think they could lose Shen based on that. Piyarvi would not be a good replacement.
But going back to St. Louis, though, I mean, Kevin's right. I mean, you're not talking about like guys in the periphery. You're talking about top 6, top 9 guys who are sandpaper guys, leaders in the locker room, in Brouwer and Backes. And Perron is sort of a skill player who I think can be a top 6 or a top 9 guy. And you mentioned last week that Sobotka might come back from the KHL. But even if that does happen, they're not as good up front as they were. So I think that Doug Armstrong has to make some other move. And the only logical move is to trade Shattenkirk, because 1 year left, UFA, and I don't think they're paying him $7 million or close to $7 million in free agency, and that's probably what he's going to earn as a free agent.
Yeah, but they have the kind of team that could hang in the playoff race until the trading deadline and then pull off that kind of deal when everybody's more inclined to pull off that kind of deal because some teams are out of it.
Right.
I think they're going to end up waiting for that because I don't think they're worried about making the playoffs. I think they're worried about winning the Stanley Cup in Hitch's last year. So I think they'll wait that one out, sort of like the '94 Rangers did, and then all of a sudden made an avalanche of moves at the deadline.
Yeah, we're pretty boring today because I agree with both you on this. I don't.
I'm gonna disagree. I don't think they can wait it out I'm gonna say right now that you just cannot assume that you're gonna make the playoffs in the Western Conference. I just think that's crazy.
But you're gonna have Shattenkirk too, so
you are. But still, I mean, you are really putting a lot of pressure.
All right, what has made you think that they can't make the playoffs? Just these couple of losses, really?
No. Just because anyone, I would say beyond Chicago, who I think is a definite, but St. Louis has been hot and cold over the last few years, and there are times if they stay cold long enough, and then the questions start to mount. Well, Hitch is here for one more year. Maybe he shouldn't be here for one more year. Maybe he shouldn't stay. Maybe they should go right now to a team.
They mount inside the organization. I think we mount those. I don't think they mount inside.
No, I don't know. With all the stuff that's going on in St. Louis, the pressure. I mean, that team.
Plus, I thought they were very consistent last season.
Yeah, they were, but
Fabry will be better.
Right.
Yeah.
Tarasenko will be better. Schwartz will be healthy. They didn't have Schwartz. Like, I'm not really worried about it.
The Vodka's hard to play against, and now you mean I know what you're saying. Like I think they need to add a forward, but do they have to get rid of Shattenkirk in order to do that? Maybe not.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
maybe they don't.
A young guy like Barbashev could come up from the AHL. I mean, guys like
they can trade Jordan Schmaltz. Jordan Schmaltz at some point is going to be a hot property if they decide not to use him.
Well, don't forget they didn't have Jaden Schwartz last year for half the season.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing, of course. And he's still up for arbitration, but they'll get that signed, obviously.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying because I brought up right away that you can't say they're better because they've lost two critical players.
Come on, we know the reason why Eck is a skeptic. Their backup goaltender is Carter Hutton, so we know that's
no.
Yeah. But there are a lot of reasons. But I think it's possible that they may wait. I mean, they've said so publicly for one thing, and Armstrong I don't think was trying to be misleading. I think he was just being honest that if the deal's not there. Now, saying all that, like, would I be shocked if they complete a deal with the Boston Bruins, for example? I mean, it certainly could happen. Like a defenseman for forward trade, I think, is a possibility if they find the right one. But I don't see it. It's going to be. I don't like this trade. I don't think they would be the least bit enticed by straight getting him back, for a year as a plug-in. I don't think they would want that. He's not a Hitchcock type of player.
Well,
so.
Go ahead, Rod.
No, I'm done. So.
Well, you mentioned Boston, Kevin, and in connection with the Rangers as well. Like, you've heard these things about David Krejci possibly being on the market. Yeah. They signed Backus, and the Nash stuff. I mean, I know that there's been a few rumors around Buffalo about the Sabres having interest in Rick Nash, and that might be based on whether they get Jimmy Vesey or not, or whether they can trade Evander Kane or not, which they're apparently trying to do. But I mean, it's not impossible to trade these big contracts, but with all this cap room occupied, I don't know whether a Nash can be moved or a Krejci can be moved, especially with how long Krejci's deal is. He just signed a new contract. It's last year he did.
I don't. Can anyone give me a good reason why they would want to trade Krejci? I mean, he is such an effective player.
Yeah.
I think he's got more worth to the team than trying to trade him based on the injury factor. I think he's worth a lot more to the Bruins. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and Backus fits really easily on the wing.
Right.
So,
I'm 100% with you there.
But it is out there. I mean, I agree.
Been out there, yep, for sure.
We can bring up the Rangers for a minute. I was asked about them last night, and so I've been thinking about them. Look, the Rick Nash thing, I think the only reason they hadn't made the deal is because they probably don't want to keep a certain amount of salary, and if they don't, then they're not going to get the right kind of player in return or players in return because another team's not going to just take 7.9 for 2 years based on Rick Nash, even though he's going to probably score 30 goals, but it's not enough anymore, right? So based on the tight cap. So the Rangers would have to eat a certain amount, and I think that's probably what's holding up any potential deal because they have to sort of weigh it out. Okay, if we do move him out and we save, and we have to keep $2 million on the books for the next couple of years, is it worth it down the road, or are we losing too much now? Because they could tell us whatever they want. They could say that they're resetting. They should have reset a year ago. That was when I said they should have, so they could have been a player in this draft, but they didn't do it. So they're not really resetting that much. They're just now sort of getting rid of some salary, and maybe in another year or two we'll have to reset, because when they sort of lost Brian Leach back in the day, they were at that point where their players were running out of gas. And so they're not there yet, but they're heading that way. And so I think with Nash, it would have been easier if they tried to move Girardi. Now, they said they weren't going to do it. What could happen is this season, if for some reason Nick Holden, who they signed from Colorado, fits in well, and all of a sudden Girardi becomes a spare part, then maybe he will be willing to, get rid of his no trade, and maybe they'd be able to move him out and, retain some salary, but eventually move him out. If they were able to do that, that would solve the problem later in the season. And their other problem is, they, like Kevin Hayes is a problem. If he goes to arbitration and gets over $3 million, I kind of wonder what they're going to do, because he doesn't have a lot of hockey IQ. He had 14 goals, but he's not an ideal player. And if Buchnevich comes in this year, even though he's a winger, and technically Hayes is a winger, even though they had him playing center, he could steal a job there. And you kind of wonder, as tight as they are to the cap, would they just walk away from that deal? I thought they maybe would trade him, but maybe nobody wanted him.
Yeah.
They did try and trade him. So that's another issue where maybe that's going to end up being a savings, not a big savings, but a savings, because they won't pay him. But if he gets paid under $2 million, they're going to have to sign him.
I've heard a lot about. We asked the question last week on the show, and I got just a bunch of people who watched the show that contacted me, and that said that they expected at least 2 or 3 players would definitely walk away from salary from arbitration rulings. That they thought this was the perfect year to do that, and that they think we'll see more of that. I mean, the tighter the cap gets, obviously that's going to happen, right? That's the natural way. Moving cap space out is a wonderful thing in and of itself, and this is a way to do it, right? This is a way to do it.
But the limit, it has to be an award over 3.5, I think. 3.5.
Right.
I mean, it might be 3.3, yeah, but it's got to be up to, if it's
right.
over
It can't
that,
be one of the but that it doesn't leave many of those players. But this is one of them that could be. But I do think that wouldn't be impossible. Now the other rumor I heard that kind of ties into the Rangers too was Justin Schultz over the weekend. And where Justin Schultz is going to end up. And we keep hearing. I know. Rutherford and Pittsburgh said, okay, we could still bring Schultz back possibly, but I've heard him more say that publicly than privately, where I think that the point where they don't have a whole bunch of money, whole bunch of money there in Pittsburgh to do that.
They have $1 million left.
$1 million?
Yeah. And the thing is that they couldn't have qualified him because that was a 10% increase on his salary. Right. I think his salary was 3.8. It was a pretty high salary coming from Edmonton. So, that was the reason. I mean, it wasn't the fact that he wasn't a good defenseman or didn't play well in the playoffs.
Let me throw something out just for fun, just so I can, not really wanting to, but I think it's just a fun thing to think about. Let's all just remember what Schultz was like playing for the Edmonton Oilers.
Right.
Okay, let's remember that now. Just think about that now. Now think about the way he played in the Stanley Cup Final. Now you're watching him play in the Stanley Cup Final where, he was still offensively helpful, but he was mindful of his defensive responsibilities. Now ask yourself, would he not be a perfect fit for the Edmonton Oilers right now?
Isn't that funny?
Now, like the way he played in the finals, like I watched him and I thought, the Red Wings are desperate for a guy with an offensive knack who can still play a little defense. They won a cup with him playing a significant number of minutes and being very helpful in the final in a series that was played at 153 miles an hour. I mean, I don't know why teams aren't jumping on him.
I'm baffled too. The fear of Edmonton. I think it's like you said. They think, okay, maybe he was just in the right system in Pittsburgh, but honestly, he wasn't really in the right system in Pittsburgh. Because there's not really it's not a defensive-minded system. Just played.
I think he was in the right system, but I think more importantly is he showed he can do it.
Yeah.
He hadn't shown he could do it.
Right. Right, but people are afraid of the Edmonton Justice.
Yeah, no, and that's completely understandable because he was there a long time.
Yeah,
right. It's tough to get past 4 or 5 years.
I get that. Yeah,
but I think, Detroit is one of the teams I put in my list for Justin Schultz still, and I still think that's up. Is that possible, Kevin? Do you think?
I haven't seen any indication of that. But I think it's logical to me. He really isn't in a position to ask for a lot of money.
No.
And I think he could be. He could be interesting. What if he's figured out? I mean, this is a guy we thought was going to be a Norris Trophy contender when he first came in. So
something like that. Not everybody, but an NHLer for sure.
Yeah. Tampa. So the three teams I heard were Detroit, Tampa, and New York. The Rangers.
Here's the problem with the Rangers. Okay, if they can scrape together the funds and bring him in, then whose spot is he taking? Basically, he's going to take Brady Shea's spot. And Brady Shea is poised to make this team.
Right.
He's a much more physical player, and he's just as fast, but he doesn't have the offense that Schultz has in his game. That's the difference. So I just don't see it unless there is going to be another move on their blue line. Now, I'll tell you the move that I've heard people talk about that I would be 1,000% against because it doesn't create a lot of cap space, and that would be Kevin Kline, meaning that you can't sign him down the road because he's going to ask too much, and so maybe you trade him now because he'll have a lot of value.
Yeah.
what about Mark Stahl?
I don't think Mark Stahl is tradable. I don't think.
I think he is tradable. I think there is.
I think to them he's not tradable. I don't think they want to.
All right. Yeah.
I don't think they want to. I think he is tradable. I don't think they want to trade him. And based on the age and the fact that I think he had a better year last year than he did the year before. But I think, the Klein factor, if you were going to move in Schultz and you intended on playing Brady Shea, then you would have to move Kevin Kline. That's the only other way.
Yeah, and I think they are going to play Brady Shea. So.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard mixed things about you know better than anybody, but I've heard mixed things about Mark Stahl too. Like I've definitely heard his name thrown around. I've heard other teams mention that they were talking to the Rangers about Mark Stahl. Now whether or not that could have implied all sorts of things, and it could have meant that they were working on a very big deal with the Rangers. I've heard Mark Stahl's name thrown in with Rick Nash actually once, which was an interesting concept. Maybe that was their way of getting, moving Rick Nash's salary along with Mark Stahl on a really big trade.
That's about $13 million.
That's a ton of money. I know. That's what I'm saying.
I don't even know what team could send back enough players.
No, it would be a team sending back,
Send back Kane and Tate. There you go.
The deal I heard, the rumor I heard, and for what it's worth, it was that the team was throwing back about $7 million in salary. So it was like you were talking about, and it was, it was kind of a little bit of trouble for trouble, problem for problem child to a degree. But Mark Stahl was also in the deal, and the Rick Nash problem child was bigger than the other problem child, basically.
I mean, if you think about it, the Klein contract would be the enticement in a Nash deal because it's so low. I mean, that would be $10 million, about $10 million worth of salary, a little over $10 million in salary. But I mean, Russ, the thing is, you look at it, they lose Yandel, they're finally free of Dan Boyle, and what they've brought back is Holden. And they're adding in Brady Shea. I mean, so you would think that maybe there's a little room there to add somebody else on the blue line if they don't think.
I don't think there's room unless you trade another one because Klein can move up a spot and still be effective. He's shown he has more offense, and he definitely has shown way more than I thought when they brought him in. Maybe Holden. Look, I'll say this: Jeff Bukaboom's done a great job with Rangers defensemen, and that's why he's an assistant now. And so there is something about the Rangers developing defensemen. They've been able to do that very well, and even got room out of Dylan McElrath, which we're not even factoring him in right now, but could be factored in at some point. I would just say with Mark Stahl, he's underappreciated because he's the easy guy to pick on because he's always covering the other team's best player, right? And he doesn't have a lot of offense in his game. So it's easy to just pick out when he gives up a goal, when he's on the ice for a goal or two, and we never talk about the other good plays he makes. And I think he played well in the playoffs. And I think because of his age, the Rangers won't move him because even though he hasn't gotten better as a player, his value has gone up based on the market.
Right. No, that's true. That's true. And he's a Stahl, and he's a Stahl too, and that does bring a certain bit of cachet with it, But Matt Cullen's another name, that we talked about in Pittsburgh.
It's unbelievable that he gets passed around. He was so valuable for this team.
And the only thing I heard Matt Cullen's a better chance at sticking around than Justin Schultz. Obviously, less money, and maybe Matt Cullen just decides that this is a great situation, which he should decide. If you're Matt Cullen, you sit there and say, yes, I will take $600,000 to play there because, for crying out loud, I just won a Stanley Cup. I'm not getting any younger, and I'm going to be successful again, in all likelihood. But teams have interest, and there might be a team that gives them twice that, on the open market. 3 times that even, maybe 1.8. You know, I heard St. Louis with Matt Cullen, and there's a team. Okay, so St. Louis, this is definitely a Hitchcock type player.
Sure.
This is, you know, and St. Louis has lost a Backus, so you bring in a Cullen.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet on nickel that it'll either be Minnesota or Pittsburgh. He'll either go home or he'll stay with his championship team, because I don't think he'll want to move his family yet again.
Yeah.
You know, and the money won't be like, nobody's going to give him a 3-year deal at that age, so the money's going to be similar. So I think he'll stay, you know, as I said, in Pittsburgh or go to Minnesota.
Yeah, he's got the 1-year deal written all over him, but
yeah,
I think that's. But he's a yeah. I mean, I've heard definitely Minnesota's for sure. It's funny now. I actually asked Minnesota the other day, a source of mine in Minnesota, if they were interested in Okposo. This was way before everything was going on, and because, you know, another Minnesota guy, and it was just funny. The source says, well, it's the law. We've got to be interested in him, right? Because he's from Minnesota. Like, they based Minnesota, and Minnesota's on their own joke now that everybody from Minnesota goes to play in Minnesota. That's what I thought was funny about it. We all talk about it, and they also know now that that's what they've got to do.
Well, you know, I've taken grief before from general managers saying, you know, just because, like, you know, in Detroit, you know, if there's a Swedish guy available in the draft, you project that he's going to go to Detroit, or if, you know, a lot of us put Bellows down to go to the Minnesota Wild in the draft, and so forth. And they always say, well, you know, it's just silly that you would think about it. No, and I always say it's not silly, because historically you've taken a lot of players from Minnesota.
It happens.
Minnesota, or Detroit has taken a lot of Swedes. You know, when in doubt, take a Swede. Like, you know, the reason we do those kind of things is because there's been a pattern.
Right.
If there was no pattern, we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, they do hate it. We've had them on the show. We've talked about Minnesota players. They bristle when we talk about it, but yet it's true. It's the way.
I got one to admit to it, which is really funny. I just think that, and you know, it is the case. And why? I mean, people from Minnesota love Minnesota. I mean, it's one of those homing type places where people are drawn back to it. I don't know why.
Before we close, let me talk a little bit about my trip to Arizona, where you know, I'm doing a big piece on John Chaika, and I spent a lot of time with a very impressive young man, and you know, really has aggressive plans to change the Coyotes organization, and you can see why he has moved up so quickly, just because he's so impressive. But what I wanted to talk about was, I ended up chatting with their players from their development camp. I interviewed Strom and Keller, Clayton Keller, and let's see, who else did I do?
Chikrin?
Well, Chikrin I did. I was saving him for last. And also McGinnis.
Right.
McGinnis is kid. I talked to him. But I want to bring up Chikrin last because, oh my gosh, you talk about impressive.
Really?
Like, first of all, this guy is a physical specimen.
Oh, yeah.
And he is a man among boys. You know, he was with elite players. And Strom told me that he played against Chikrin 3 times, and Chikrin was matched up against him. He didn't get a point, didn't get a sniff. And he was such the dominant player in that development camp that was hard to describe. And, you know, when I interviewed him, this guy is like 17 or 18 going on 28 or 29. Like, he is a very, very, very mature kid. I really, really was impressed by him. I've been at this game a long time, and I don't remember meeting too many kids that had it all the way he did. You know, the fact that he can play, he can skate, you know, and obviously I didn't see a lot of them as I would the younger, the Americans, because even though he grew up in Florida, but he was playing in Canada for the last several years. So anyway, I was very impressed by that, and I brought up to him the fact that, you know, the last time we had this situation where a player was ranked in the top 3 or 4 at the start of the year and then slid, was my good friend Cam Fowler, who I also have a liking for. And we all know that when Fowler was drafted later than he was expected, what did he do? He played the following fall.
Right.
Here's my prediction. We might see Chikrin playing this year for the Coyotes. They are smitten with him. There's no doubt about it. And if he looks as good as I think he's going to look, I think there's a chance he'll start the season with him, even though he was down. So
I think there's a chance. The only worry is because he had a shoulder injury a couple of years ago that I don't know if I want to push him that much. I know he looks the part, but I've seen him getting beat in juniors too. I've seen Max Jones pull some moves on him. It's not like he's infallible yet, like Ekblad. Ekblad to me was the same guy that you just described. The only other guy that sort of gave me that feeling in the last 5 years was Ekblad when I met him after a junior game, and I was like, wow, this kid is not just your average junior player. And so I think he's really close, but I am impressed with him, there's no doubt.
Well, and I to be honest, to be totally honest, in fairness, I've had scouts tell me they're not even sure he's a top pairing. Chikrin's a top pairing defenseman. So I've talked to guys who think he's a 3. Now, I guess we'll have to see. But he was very impressive, and the reason why Chaika was so aggressive is that they had him ranked number 7 on their list.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I mean, I thought the move was adept because the fact that they walked away with Chychrun made it worthwhile. Very few players would have made that deal worthwhile. Getting him made it worthwhile.
Well, there was a lot of talk that Buffalo was very interested in Chychrun at 8, but they got Alex Nylander, and he was higher on their board, and that was the reason they didn't take him. And all I know is at the combine that Russ and I was at, I can't remember which young player it was that was talking about, he had done really well in some of the testing, but then when he compared himself to Chychrun, he was like comparing himself to Superman because he was just far above everybody else.
Clayton Keller, who could be Patrick Kane, right before I talked to Chychrun, and it was like interviewing a boy and a man. I mean, there were two different. I mean, it really was different. Now, the final thing I want to bring up on that is because Chaika's taking a lot of criticism over giving back that second-round pick. But here's why that made sense, and I didn't get this from him. We didn't even talk about that. But this is my own observation. The Red Wings, Chychrun would have been a perfect fit for them. This is a team that was looking for a young defenseman. They wanted a skater. So I think Chaika knew that the Red Wings, of course, needed a defenseman. We're looking at defensemen, and he would have been a logical selection for them at that spot, which is why he was willing to give up that second-round pick because he thought the Red Wings were going to take him.
Yeah, I mean, I had him ranked 8th. Having him ranked 7th makes total sense. Tippett's a good defensive coach, so even if he does get nudged along a little too soon, Tippett's not going to start him on the top pairing anyhow. He would be on the second pairing, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but you have to just wait and see what he looks like in camp. But yeah, I like it.
If you listen to my USA Today podcast this week, you'll hear Tippett talking about it. We interviewed him about on our podcast, and he wouldn't rule it out. Now, saying all that, like it's certainly not a slam dunk.
Right.
To be sure. He as Russ pointed out, and it's very accurate. You're usually better served to go back. So.
Yeah. No, I mean it's exciting for. I mean.
The same thing is, I saw your video with Provorov in camp, and when you look at Provorov in camp drills, there were some people that still were very taken back, like, wow, he's just flawless out there, and I'm like, well, because he doesn't. He's one of these defensemen that doesn't think about anything. It all just comes naturally, and so there's no hiccup where mentally there's like a second in processing. It all processes quickly, but we're still only watching him in a development camp. We're not watching him in a game, and that's even a 3-on-3 game isn't going to prove out to be everything that a preseason game is, and that's what Ron Hextall was getting at too, and he was right. Hey, even Provorov said. Because, again, somebody brought up the question, is there anything you could learn at the junior level? And it's the one question I hate in this world. And he said, yes, I could learn a lot. And even Ron Hextall, like I told you the other day, said, hey, you could be the best defenseman in the league. Maybe you shoot for that. That's always something a player could shoot for. So that's why that is the good answer to that other side of the coin.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough when you watch guys like Provorov skate. In this situation, obviously there are all different levels of talent at the rookie camps. There are guys who are just on a prayer. Just like that. And then there's players who are flat out thoroughbreds.
And there's players with different motivations, Zach. At the Toronto camp, you had Matthews and Marner, and everybody seemed a step below, obviously because those are their 2 first-round picks and extremely talented. But a kid like Tyler Wong, who was in Lethbridge last year, or Trevor Moore, who played at the University of Denver, they were the stars of the scrimmages because they're playing for pro contracts. They're trying to earn an invite to training camp.
Well, Mike, would it be fair to say, though, that after seeing this camp and everybody together, that Bracco does fit in well with that group?
Yeah, Bracco played with Matthews a lot, and every time I saw that, I thought back to what we talked about him and Matthews playing on the under-18 team, and how, I mean, Bracco needs to get thicker, bigger, stronger, but in a couple years, that might be a combo that will work because he's a playmaking winger, and Matthews is a shooting center, so I think that would be a good combo.
Crazy amount of talent coming in the NHL is going to be exciting. I mean, really, it just feels like everybody you talk to.
That's the one good thing. Like, even when I worked the collectibles angle of this sport, the hockey market has it better than any other sport because there's always been a slowdown in baseball. You get 3 or 4 guys in baseball, and then it slows down. You get your Mike Trouts, and then you have to wait a couple of years. And with basketball, you get a couple of guys every year. You get 2 or 3, and then that's about it, and then it slows down. The NHL has really been putting in a tremendous amount of guys for the last 5 years or more every year. Every year.
Well, when the second tier of rookies feels like Dylan Larkin, that's the insanity of it all. You know what I mean? It's like when we were going through when he's not one of the top 3 or whatever. It's just that kind of stuff's insane. I mean, these guys, the top. We used to have like a Dylan Larkin would be guaranteed rookie of the year.
Right.
5-10 years ago, it feels.
Again, considering that Barrett Jackman won it back in whatever year he won it, there was not a lot of competition that year, right?
Right.
Not like Barrett Jackman. If you took his rookie numbers and put him in this group, he wouldn't even make a list.
No, you have superstars. I mean, and program.
I think Jackman went over Zetterberg that year. I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. I think you're right about that. I mean, he was an impactful, and obviously, being where he played and positionally and all that, but. Yeah, there's a huge amount of this. It's just it's crazy. I mean, when you watch, and this is really hard for me, or I think, and it's got to be even harder for fans because I at least have Russ telling me that these guys these guys should go back. I've got people like you guys who say they need to grow more. But as a fan, man, when you're watching those guys, when you're watching those players, some of these players skate, when you're watching Provorov skate, you're thinking this is like who. He's the best defenseman on the Flyers right now. Like, you look at him, you're like, there's nobody else. Who else can I put up against him, right? Like, you're sitting there, okay, Gostisbehere had a great year, and that's not an exaggerate. I mean, when you watch him skate, no one skates like him. Like, there's nobody who can skate like him, right? So
there's other parts of the game then.
Of course, and there's so much more to it, and it's maturity, and it's age, and it's like being able to handle an 82-game schedule. There's a whole lot of things that go into this.
You have to be careful. I mean, Alex.
Oh yeah, no, you do.
Yeah, Alex Nylander starred in the Sabres scrimmage, and but Alex Nylander's probably not ready to be in the NHL right now. So he's either going to go back to Mississauga, or there's some talk about him going back to Sweden for a year. I mean, yeah, you can be lights out in the rookie camp. It doesn't really mean a lot.
The only knock on Alex Nylander, and I saw it in the under-18s, is the motor's not running full bore all game long. And I think they want to sort of get that fired up before they put him in the league. But I do think that he has the talent to be better than his brother, and I do think it's going to take another year or two just because, for whatever reason, it's not like he takes shifts off, but he's not as effective all game long.
Well, one interesting thing from the end of the rookie camp that Mike Babcock on Saturday said, William Nylander and Austin Matthews will be put together at training camp, but with the goal of maybe them playing together during the regular season. If that's the case, then this talk of Austin Matthews starting on the third line is bunk.
It had to always be ridiculous, didn't it?
I mean, well, it's the same thing that happened in Buffalo last year. Ryan O'Reilly was the number one center.
Exactly.
Jack Eichel was the number 2. It took about half a season.
Again, I'm going to say this, and some people won't like me. I think the talk was coming from the Canadian media, because if this were Connor McDavid, they'd be like, oh, he should be starting on the top line, but this is an American kid from Scottsdale who they look at differently and think, oh, you have to ease him in because he may not be the same kind of prodigy. And it's like, at least Mike Babcock understands what he has there.
You're going to play him behind Tyler, but every time I hear people say he's going to be behind Tyler Bozak on the depth chart, I'm like, and I think Bozak's a great player, but they've been trying to trade him for 3 years. They've been trying to trade him for 3 years, so you're going to put this kid behind him? Anyway, that's ridiculous. We got to go, but before we go again, remember to go to patreon.com/hockey. $5 a month to $10 a month, awesome stuff for us. Really helps a lot. Helps keep the show going. We want to bring the show to you, and we want to make it better. We want to bring more elements to it.
I'm
Remember
setting
Without
up
the
my
Buzz.
prizes tomorrow. Tomorrow they go out.
Very good, very good. Remember that prize is coming to you. Remember, Without the Buzz, guys, it is just hockey. We will talk to you soon.